Hey guys, here we are. We're on the beautiful Beaver Lake in Northwest Arkansas. A really cool place that I've been able to fish a lot of my life, you know, from a really early age. A cool, gorgeous lake. The White River flows into this lake, feeds it, and then it goes down the chain just like Table Rock, Bull Shoals, North Fork, all those other North Arkansas, South Missouri lakes. Clear, deep water, smallmouth, largemouth, and spotted bass in this place, which is a really cool feature of Arkansas. I can't wait to show you guys how I break it down, how I look at it, how I look at different regions of it and different times of year. But hopefully at the end of the day's video, you can have a little bit more to run with and hopefully catch fish and put fish in the boat for yourself. So Beaver Lake offers a lot as far as structure and cover goes. There's lots of bluff banks, lots of rock, lots of transitional banks, pea gravel points, things of that nature. There's buckbrush when the water gets up. There's also standing timber, which is something that holds a lot of fish as well from one end of the lake to the other. Crawfish are a huge forage here, and it's just gonna be something you get in clear, rocky bodies of water. With that being said, threadfin shad, lots of little minnows, things of that nature. You're gonna have bluegill in play as well. When I come to Beaver Lake, I break it down to 3 sections. One, the lower end. That's what I'm calling from the dam up to, let's say, Little Clifty Creek. From there, I'm going to go to the midsection. That's Little Clifty, all the way up to the Highway 12 bridge, the big main bridge that runs right above Prairie Creek Marina. From then, I go into what I call up the river. That's Highway 12 bridge, all the way up the White River that feeds into this lake. That's where you're gonna start to see a lot of different terrain and a lot of different fishing styles coming into play. Beaver Lake, obviously nestled in the mountains of Northwest Arkansas. It's a really cool area because there's a lot to do here. It's a vacation place. Obviously the beautiful lake here. You also have the Fayetteville, Rogers, Bentonville area where there's just things to do at all times. I mean, it's a booming part of the state. Another really unique town close by is Eureka Springs, a very well-known tourist attraction. Something to check out if you're up in the area as well, not too far here from Beaver Lake. Beaver Lake has lots of great access points. You know, it's a big lake, it has lots of fingers, lots of arms. My personal favorite, Prairie Creek. It's up kind of mid-lake, more towards the upper end, but mid-lake. Not too far to go down to the dam, not too far to go up the river and start fishing. That's where a lot of the big tournaments go out of. You're always gonna have somewhere to put in if you wanna fish, you know, one specific area. If you don't feel like running around a whole lot, there's gonna be a ramp in that area that you wanna fish in. As you can see, watch your water levels on Beaver Lake. You're able to not have a parking dock. So let's talk about seasons. The first one being spring. And there's 2 phases that really break down in spring, pre-spawn and spawn. I'm calling pre-spawn from early March until really about mid-April. And I feel like mid-April is where that true spawn starts to take off. That's where I feel like the big wave comes from. So when pre-spawn comes around, those fish are getting ready to move back into those spawning areas. This is a big major creek, kind of right from that transition of what I call the lower end to the midsection, and a creek that I've actually caught them in a lot in the past. A lot of people call this Clifty Creek. So coming into this creek, you're gonna see these fish are wanting to move up it into the back to spawn, or even back in these little smaller pockets to spawn. But out here, you'll notice some points on the way in, little runouts like that and that there. This is obviously a little bit shallower, rounded point right there. That's what I'm looking at when I'm trying to find stopping grounds. And even as it gets closer, I'll work my way back. I'm trying to keep up with the fish. See, like a small little jut out like that right there would be a great little stopping spot for one on his way back here to spawn in the back end of this creek. Same with these little points and little mouths of these pockets, because these fish are just on a highway and they're heading back here. So these little blue areas in the backs of these little creeks and ditches and stuff, that's where their end goal is. So now let's jump into the true spawn, what you really think of when you think of springtime fishing. We covered pre-spawn, where they might be stopping on the way in. Let's get to where they actually get to do their thing. One obvious one right out of the gate would be something like this. Steep pocket on both sides, but it has little shallow flats back here in the back and these drains. It'd be a great place for one to jump into and spawn, as well as the main creek back here in the very back end. Big channel running back here, and then it flattens out. You notice it gets real blue, stuff like that. And that's where those fish will spawn up. There's some docks in this creek as well. That gives them another reason to be in there. And then if you want to move out and look at like smallmouth and spotted bass spawning grounds, this is a very, very popular spot right here. I'm sure a lot of people know about, but it's just an island with a ridge that runs out to it, and it's pea gravel out through there, kind of an old road bed, but some pea gravel rock mixed in as well. And that's where I'll look for those smallmouth. They'll be out there in 5 to sometimes even 10 foot of water. Lots of what I'm looking at are gonna be where to find bigger largemouth. You know, those back thirds of the creeks, when they get on beds, you can actually see them. Smallmouth and spotted bass, they're almost smarter in the sense that they spawn where they can't be seen and picked off easy. But that's just a spotted bass and smallmouth thing. There will be plenty of largemouth in this place up on the bank to be seen during that spawn time of the year. All right, guys, so here we are, we're on the water now, and we're talking about springtime fishing. And I've got a few baits laid out, things that I tend to pick up the most when I come here to Beaver Lake in the spring. And this goes for down here on the lower end, all the way up to the river, you know. A color might vary a tad bit depending on watercolor, but these are kind of 4 that I will have on my front deck in the springtime from one end of this lake to the other. The first being a crankbait, a little crawdad crankbait. This is gonna really shine in that pre-spawn time frame when those fish are setting up to move back into these, you know, spawning flats like you can see behind me. We're sitting on a little secondary point right now. Something like that to wind across the rocks on it would be really good to key up a reaction bite. They are gonna be targeting those crawfish a little bit more, kind of like your winter cranking. Be a great way to get a reaction strike. With that, slowing it down a little bit, pre-spawn, a big jig. It's just a 1/2 ounce jig. It's got a little bit beefier skirt on it. I like throwing a jig because it's gonna trigger bigger bites. I always have felt that way. Catch them getting ready to move up and start bedding. Doesn't get any better than that right there. I'm gonna get back out there and get me another one. Then we move into true spawn, is what I'm kind of getting into with these last 2 rods. One, right off the bat, a search bait. This is a chatterbait. Green pumpkin chatterbait. Green pumpkin works great here because the watercolor normally fits a green pumpkin. It's normally kind of clear. They're starting to get irritated when they're getting on those beds with bluegill and things like that. Like I said, green pumpkin's a great color for Beaver Lake. It always has been. And now going into this last rod, and this one is more coming into play when those fish are getting on beds. You know, you're starting to see them on beds, and it's just a light Texas rig, little straight shake flipping hook and a smaller stick bait. I like throwing it like this on a little bit bigger line. There is cover, there's flooded timber behind me. There is stuff for them to get in. Bushes are in the water sometimes. I like flipping around that little light Texas rig with a small stick bait, throwing that on a Johnny Morris carbon light. This one is a 7.6 medium heavy, 16-pound fluorocarbon on a platinum reel 8-to-1 gear ratio. Great little bait to slow down and really key in on those bedfish. All right, let's dive into summertime. And what I mean by that is post-spawn going into the dog days of summer. You know, those fish get done spawning, they're gonna start moving back out of those creeks, off those flats where they did their deal at in the spring. Now they're gonna start getting out into their summer homes where they'll stay, you know, all the way through August and up into September sometimes. So when we look at this place, there's lots of points and ridges. This place is almost all points and ridges. We're gonna be looking for that same stuff, just I'm gonna go out more towards the main lake now and look for main lake points, main lake ridges. So let's dive into some map study. Let me show you guys what I'm talking about when it comes to post-spawn, fish setting up in their summer homes, where they'll be all the way through like a September even sometimes. We're looking down here on this map. I'm down here around Lost Village right now. There's 2 major points, or a few major runouts that kind of stick out, and I am right off the main channel. I mean, the main drag is right there behind me. And I'm looking at these points that are running out. Now, there's lots of smaller runouts, kind of more subtle, and there's one right here. And look at this one here. It comes out, runs out there to 23, and then when it hits 24, 25, it almost plateaus out there on top of it. That's a very, very good stopping ground, or really a living ground for a summertime bass. and they might be out here on the tip, they might be right up on top, but that's normally a place that fish are gonna relate to. If I had to bet money on it, they live there in the summer. They probably live there year round, but especially in the summer. And another one like this one here, it runs out deeper a little bit quicker, but they should be somewhere up and down that. And then you can jump right over to another big run out. And this one actually has a road bed coming off of it too. And see that little plateau out there in 26 feet? That little plateau on top of that point is a really good spot. That's something that I would have to look at if I was going out in the water in the summertime month. But that's what I'm gonna look for, is those points, ridges, and I like 15 to 25, and I know that's a broad spectrum of depth range, but on a lake that's this steep, it's really not. And what I mean by that, contours are very tight. This is a deep, clear reservoir. Keep that in mind when you're looking at a big depth range. It's not as big as it really sounds. So here we are, summertime on Beaver Lake. Now I'm starting to get offshore. Now I'm getting out here in these points with these little plateaus that run way out. Two baits that I really like to have on the front deck when doing that. Once again, a jig. Lots of crawfish in this lake, so a jig is gonna be a good presentation. I like to use that as almost my search bait out here on these points and stuff. Drag it around, kind of experiment up and down the point, try to figure out exactly where the fish are positioning. That's my search bait. And then what I like to do is finesse it up a little bit. Go to a drop shot when I know where they're at, where they're setting up, and start really dissecting the schools of fish, or trying to get every bite I can with a drop shot. It's gonna be more of a numbers bait. The jig is gonna be more of a search bait, bigger bite getter, but a drop shot's gonna get you a lot of bites, either like a green pumpkin little worm like this, or like a pink one, a morning dawn, twilight, something along those lines in the summer is a really, really good bait, or a good color choice as well. But both of those are gonna be my two offshore search baits in the summertime months. I mean, he lit it up like he'd never seen one before. So now we come into fall time of the year. My personal favorite time to fish up here. Starting to get those cooler nights, a little bit cooler days, shorter days, leaves are changing. It's a gorgeous time to be in Arkansas as it is, but my favorite time to fish in the natural state. So when I'm looking at fall time, I'm thinking October and November, even into early December. December I know might sound a little bit late to be fall, but in Arkansas, we have Arkansas weather, so fall kind of goes from October to December. In my opinion, it does. What I'm gonna look for here, shad, bait fish. I know I talked about crawfish being a big forage, bluegill being a big forage. Here's where you're gonna see your shad start to play. If you're around bait, you're gonna be around bass, and that's always been my motto in fall. And that's why I like it so much. You can see those bait balls moving around in the mouths of creeks and down in the backs of creeks. That means you're around those fish. Those bait balls are gonna start moving back in the creek. The fish are gonna be right behind them. And it's pretty easy to pinpoint if you spend some time looking. Just looking for roamers out here over the top of timber, chasing shad and things like that. It's a pretty good start to the day. Real pretty fish, black tail, black spots. So diving into an example of an area, a place that I've caught a lot of fish out of in the past as well. I'm looking here at Forge Creek. This is in that midsection of the lake that I was talking about earlier, in between Little Clifty and the 12 Bridge. You can cut in here, and what I would do in the fall time is literally start the mouth and start idling, graphing back through there. Side scan 2D, just looking for bait. A lot of times you can see them with your eyes. You'll see them, those big balls of bait kind of floating around, pushing around on top of the water. They might even be schooling on them. And the neat thing about Forge is a big main creek, real big ditch that runs through it, but there's these little feeder ditches as well. And that gives them just something else to kind of pin those shad up in. And when you find the bait, it might be something where it's the midsection. It might be something where they're right out here in the mouth, early on. And what they're trying to do is move back into the backs end of these things. And those bass are just following them. But you get out there, once you get around the bait, I like to take like a paddle tail swim bait, sometimes a spinner bait if you got clouds and wind, and just cover as much water. You kind of got to feel out how deep you need to be fishing your baits. But like I said, you find the shad, you'll find the bass. They're gonna relate to them a lot in the fall. It's a lot of searching, but when you find them, you can catch them and catch them wholesale style. All right guys, so here we are, fall time of the year now, my favorite time of the year to fish in Arkansas in the natural state. We've got two things here. I've talked about catching these fish out in ditches. Two things. One, kind of heavy power fishing. Throwing a 1/2 ounce spinner bait and just burning it around out here when I get around that bait. You want to find the bait and you'll find the bass. Throwing that bigger spinner bait and just really burning it around is a great way to get a good reaction bite. And sometimes letting it sink down, counting it down as well. Other thing, just a swim bait, paddle tail swim bait on a jig head. That gets a lot of bites too. You can sink it down, count it down, slow roll it around out there. It's a little bit slower, entices a more finicky bite than I feel like the spinner bait does, but it gets a lot of bites in the fall. So now let's dive into winter. In between fall and spring, obviously, those fish are just in the cold months of the year. They're really lethargic in a way, but there's still lots of very big fish to be caught in the winter. I'm talking about mid-December through the end of January into February, really the coldest months of the year. And this place is cool in the sense that it's clear. It's clear water, you know, a lot of forward-facing tends to shine in, looking for fish, you know, floating around. But these fish will stay shallow even at a place like this. It's so clear. There will be lots of fish to be caught shallow, and that's where I feel like you're gonna catch the biggest ones, on Beaver Lake. I'm gonna be looking for transition banks, bluff banks, anything that has to do with rocks, something that can bear heat like those rocks and hold those fish there to keep them a little bit more active than normal, but I'll dive into it and show you guys exactly what I'm talking about on the map. A lot of what I'm talking about, good rocks and transitions, you're gonna have to look for with your eyes, but I can show you some stuff to kind of clue you in looking at a topographic map as well. So we're still here in Ford Creek where I was talking about I love to fall fish. Those fish are still gonna be kind of close to those same areas. You're gonna set up a little bit different. Going back here in the back of Ford, there's a little pocket right here. Two things stick out to me that I would have to look at. This little rounded point right here, where it rolls back in and hits back into that steeper bank. There's probably gonna be a transition of rock somewhere right through there. There's a dock there as well, which is another high percentage thing. And then right across, steeper bank right here, channel swing bank, where it hits out here with this rounded point, that little corner right there, there's probably gonna be a transition, a rock transition of some sort. There will be a fish on that spot, guaranteed, because there's a change there. There's no doubt a change from that steep bank to that point. And you can tell the contours kind of get real tight and dark right there. There'll be something there that's gonna hold a fish. Like I said, a lot of what I'm looking for it visually on the bank. And you can assume that if you see a rock transition on a bank, say from chunk rock to pea gravel, it probably runs that way all the way out there, you know, way off into the water. So you kind of have to visualize it in your head and use your eyes, look around at the bank, think about what you're seeing and imagine it running out into the lake as well. But that's something just on a map that would point me in the right direction anyways. Assuming there would be some chunk rock and things of that nature, maybe going into like a pea gravel or something, just a rock change. Normally you can see it visibly, and if you can see it on the bank, you can assume that it runs out into the water a good ways as well. So it's warming up, I had to shed a layer, but let's talk about winter fishing here on Beaver Lake. I've got two baits here that I really live and die with in the winter, in Arkansas in general, but especially at lakes like this. You know, you can catch them on a ton of stuff. Jigs, dragging around, finesse baits. You can really catch them on a lot, but I like these two. One being a crankbait, just a red crankbait, but here's the thing that I normally tend to lean towards in the winter. I want kind of a dulled down crankbait. This is not a super bright one. Kind of keeps it a little bit more subtle in this clean water. But I really like a deeper diving crankbait than like a square bill, you know, a 6 to 10 foot diver. Just gets down in that strike zone that tends to play in the wintertime on these rock banks, rock transitions. Another thing that I throw a lot, and that's just clear water winter fishing, is a jerkbait. And I love throwing jerkbait because I can cover a lot of water just like the crankbait. That's why I tend to lean towards these a lot, is because I like to cover water in the winter until I find them. Throwing that jerkbait, I throw it on a spinning rod in the winter. The reason I like to throw one on a spinning rod in the winter is because I have that drag there, able to eat it a little bit more finicky, and I have that drag on that spinning reel to help me out with that. Is also, the braid leader is gonna keep me more connected with that bait as well. And then that drag just kind of counters with it and make sure you're not gonna rip that hook out or anything. So, two baits, jerkbait, crankbait, I'm all about covering water, looking for them in the winter. Also, if it's real cold, it keeps you a little bit warmer because you're always moving. But that's my two go-tos in the winter at Beaver Lake. All right, guys, as always, thank you for watching. Hopefully this video helped you learn something about the area, the region, this part of Arkansas, my favorite part of Arkansas, as well as Beaver Lake, and hopefully help you put some more fish in the boat if that's what you're here to do. So maybe I'll see you out there.